Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell Mendes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is, as far as I'm aware at least, the last of the 500 Kingdoms. This is, as you can see on the cover here, possibly if you squint, I don't know how large your YouTube box is, this is a novella. So, this isn't a proper novel, but, it's a solid read, standalone book, so it fits my criteria. Anyways, this one actually directly picks up after A Sleeping Beauty. The Sleeping Beauty, which was the last one of these that I did, that was a story that basically is about a princess who is sort of in a collision of the Sleeping Beauty and Snow White stories, which get invaded by the ring cycle, among other things. And there are two characters, one of whom is really very much tertiary, and kind of only appears at the end as an actual character as opposed to an obstacle. And Siegfried's friend Prince Leopold are the stars of this. That is, Leopold is not a point of view character in the last book. He is Siegfried's friend, and the two of them throughout that last book had, sort of a gentleman's agreement that they would help each other through their various trials until sort of they reached the final test, because there was nothing against the rules of them helping each other, and Leopold was looking for something of a golden ticket to, not be nearly as desperately starving to death, and Siegfried was just looking for a nice stable place and probably somebody to get him out of being caught in the ring cycle's dooms. And at the end of that, Siegfried's family had basically been following him everywhere, dropping off Brunhilde, who is technically Siegfried's aunt, asleep and in a ring of fire, which he is supposed to, according to the story laid out for him, he is supposed to see her and fall in love with her, and then thus follows Doom and Ragnarok. But Siegfried had decided he didn't want Doom and Ragnarok and an early death, so he had been studiously avoiding this. So Prince Leopold, however, happily sort of threw a wrench in everything, and said, wow, that's an attractive lady, and waltzed past the ring of fire and woke Brunhilde up, and the two of them fall in love and are heading off for their adventuresome happily ever after all of these things happen. And so this story opens with Brunhilde and Leopold heading for effectively Greece, and the reason why is because Brunhilde is Fae. I mean, the Fae in this universe can occasionally become gods because everything is so deeply affected by the tradition, which is affected by the stories people tell. And so when a bunch of Fae show up somewhere, a lot of regular people start thinking that they're gods, and then they tell stories about it, and then the tradition molds these people into those roles. And so Brunhilde is immortal, or at least quasi-immortal, and Leopold is not. And so they're on a quest to find something so that he can have a lifetime that is a lifespan that is equivalent to hers. And so they have headed for this, Greece in effect, in order to find a means of making him immortal, because she tells him, from what she'd heard, this was a place that had the most effective and most frequent creation of immortals in the idiom that they want. That is, they don't want to become immortal by being turned into a statue that lasts forever, and you don't want to become immortal like the Sibyl, who asked for immortality but forgot to also ask for eternal youth, and thus will live forever in her cave, becoming older and older and more fragile, and so on and so forth, but, technically still alive. And so they've gone there. And then what happens is they trip and fall straight into the Persephone Hades myth. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Persephone Hades myth is effectively that Demeter's daughter Persephone is out in a field one day when the god of death, Hades, is just sort of mooching along and instantly falls in love with her and decides he's going to kidnap her. So he kidnaps her and takes her into Hades with him, and they stay together, and Demeter, the goddess of, like, summer and spring and harvests and whatnot, becomes depressed, and that's why, and the entire world fell into a deep winter because she was basically depressed and refusing to help anybody or do anything. Anyways, they finally track Persephone down, find her, and Hades tricks her into eating some food from the underworld, and because of that, she is forced to return to the underworld for half the year. That she's allowed to return above ground for half the year, but she will have to return home for the other half, and so on and so forth. And there's a certain amount of implicit, unfairness, and she is trapped against her will. This story sets it up that Persephone ran into Hades. Well, Hades was pretending to just be a regular guy, and the two of them met and fell in love and started to get along, and Hades basically finally meets up with her, and they arrange for her to be kidnapped. Effectively, the thing is that they're circumventing Demeter, who is deeply determined to keep her little Kore from ever growing up. She looks at her and she's like, "Oh, look at my little sweetie. Isn't she adorable?" And Persephone is deeply sick of this. It's that point that we sometimes see of, of a young woman whose parents are maybe not deliberately, but they are in effect infantilizing her, and who runs off with somebody. In this case, we're doing the romance novel thing. He's not bad. And Demeter isn't bad, it's just he's got a bad reputation because nobody likes the god of death. And Demeter, who is an eternal mother, we're dealing kind of with the Molly Weasley shtick here. That is, a woman who never stops seeing her children as her babies and thus never stops babying them, and when they try to say, "Oh my god, Mom, I'm a grown-up now," that it just goes right past her. That was a thing that I always felt about Molly Weasley, is she's a great mother right up until they hit the teen years, at which point things start to get a little bit troublesome. And because I've always felt like when you look at the opening of the first Harry Potter book and you see Molly Weasley talking aloud to her kids, "Now, which platform is the right platform?" And Ginny speaks up. The thing is, Ginny is 10. And 10 is a little bit old for a parent to didactically and fatuously look at their child and go, "Now, dear, which is the right platform? I know you've been going every year since you were born, and we all know it, and I went to school here, but I'm going to ask the question anyways." By age 10, that's a lot of talking down. And so there is, so there's a sense in which Molly is great up until she isn't. And Demeter is kind of like that she's great right up until she isn't. Anyway, so Demeter, when her daughter is taken, kicks up a stink and falls into despair and goes wandering. But the thing where this story really kicks in is that Brunhilde and Leopold are walking around when suddenly Hades' henchman, who is supposed to do the actual kidnapping of Persephone, shows up and sees a blonde immortal lady and says, "Well, there's only one blonde immortal lady around," because, don't forget, this is Greece. The Greeks are not known for being pale and blonde. People from the Mediterranean, not known for being pale and blonde. They are, in fact, known for being dark-skinned and dark-haired, if you're going to talk in generalizations. It's bordering on the Middle East, not generally a place with a lot of blonde people. And so, with Persephone being as far as he's aware, and he's not that bright a spark, is Thanos, Thanatos? I do whichever it is. The one that Hades sent. Starts with a TH. Anyways. I'm obviously confusing this with Marvel, but I'm not going there. Anyways, the thing is that he's not too bright a spark, so he sees Brunhilde, who is, a pale goddess with blonde hair, and says, "Ooh, well, that's who I'm looking for," and makes off with her. And so, while Hades and Persephone amble together comfortably into the underworld because they both decided, we'll just figure it out when we get there. Because the whole point of him kidnapping her was once you are taken by death, like forcibly in that way, you are officially dead and cannot be removed from the underworld. So they take Brunhilde, and Brunhilde is abruptly, according to their rules, stuck in the underworld, and Persephone and Hades have to try to figure out some way to get Brunhilde back out, because there are rules about these things. Anyways, Leopold sees this, and basically storms Olympus with the god horses that he and Brunhilde had been given by her family as a wedding present, and winds up having to effectively help the gods deal with the fact that all of a sudden there's winter in their lands, which there never was before, and all of the mortals in their lands have not coped with winter ever since, the gods moved in. So it's a whole thing. Anyway, so we have the Persephone myth happening concurrently with Brunhilde and Leopold, and so there's a lot of interaction just, shifting what the Persephone myth is and is about, and finishes with a sort of a flourish by having Leopold and Brunhilde effectively do the Oedipus thing. That is, they have to walk back out of Tartarus, out of Hades, and, Leopold has to lead, and he has to trust that Brunhilde will stay behind him, and he can't look back. And they succeed where Oedipus did not, because this is a romance novel with a happy ending, and not the story of Oedipus, which is, tragic. So it's an interesting little novella. There's a lot of... There is a lot more Greek myth in this than anything else. We're not hitting on a lot of stories in this one. This is not like some of these where it's sort of like drink if you recognize the fairy tale sort of things. It's, it's basically just Persephone, Hades, and like I said, a flourish of Oedipus, not Oedipus, Orpheus. God, did I say Oedipus before? I meant Orpheus. Anyone in the comments section, yes, I corrected myself. But, the Orpheus myth, it's just, they're kind of as a thing at the end. But anyways, it's a fun, slightly fractured fairy tale look at the gods of Mount Olympus, and also is interesting because it recontextualizes the shenanigans they get up to, again, as manipulations of the tradition, forcing them into these roles that have been invented by humans who can't help themselves, I guess, in imagining their gods as irrational loony people. Ignore the pop-up at the bottom, my mouse moved. Anyways, that's everything, and that's the last of the 500 Kingdoms, at least for the nonce, and I will see you all next week.